This is Ryan at Cincy Life Church and nextcannabis.com, and today I'm just talking about new revelations in physics and in creation science, and talking about this with other people has given me a new conversation for one of my YouTube videos. And basically I get a lot of theories that atheists or people that discredit or discount the topics in the Bible, such as the book of Genesis and the creation story. And a lot of these complaints are that the topic of the creation and a 6,000-year-old Earth or a young Earth, or what the writers in the Bible portrayed as some kind of science is laughable or untrue based on what we know of science today. And the theory of quantum physics and quantum mechanics, more specifically, is that we just don't know. There's a lot of things that have turned our science upside down through these scientific theories, where at the smallest element of an atom, time and space really don't continue to exist as we know it. Time almost stands still at some point. And a lot of these things are very applicable to the Bible, but one thing that is very clear is that in the Bible, in Genesis 1:3, verse 3, it says that God created light. And that was his first order of business in the topic of creation. And in quantum mechanics and quantum physics, we see that the atom is held together by light, whereas once we thought the atom was the smallest element of the universe that we found. Now we know that it's made up of even smaller elements, and those elements are held together by waves of light. And it's just interesting the way that the story of creation, as unique as it is in history, is now coming to be known as at least not only plausible, but very true. It connects things about the universe that we didn't once know about the universe. And then another thing that I think is just funny is that a lot of these anti-biblical people think that the Bible's silly because it was created by people, or it was written by people who thought the earth was flat. And I don't know of any Bible author or verse that says the earth is flat. And if we get looking at history, just because we have a lot of science and technology today, it doesn't mean that we're the only generation who knew that the earth was round and that the universe was made up of cosmological entities that were round. If we look at the Egyptian pyramids and some of the artifacts found in there, they had complete structure, working models of the galaxy in their tombs. And so it's interesting to know that we're not the only people in history that had a concept of how this galaxy or how this universe worked. Ancients knew that, and of course, if we look at Moses, where he came from was Egypt, and these are the people who had working models of the universe, or at least of our galaxy. So I just wanted to play you this video. Credit goes to P.P. Simmons on YouTube. And this, if you read, or if you look into the end of this video and read the concepts from about minute 7 onward, you'll see what I'm talking about relating to quantum physics in the Bible that were unexplainable before and lend much credit to the Bible creation theory now. So here we go.
Physics, the study of quantum mechanics, is the study of the smallest elements and forces of matter, and how they react and interact, and thus create all that we know. The word quantum, its plural is quantum, comes from the Latin word quantus, or how much. There seem to be several prevailing schools of thought on what exactly these small elements are. Are they particles? For in some experiments they behave exactly like a particle should. Or are they waves? Because in other experiments The very same elements behave exactly as a wave should. But how can this be? Waves and particles are two entirely different forms of reality. One school of quantum mechanics thought is that the elements are both wave and particle, or as some describe, packets made up of particles, called wave packets. This is called the particle-wave duality theory of quantum mechanics. We have known about atoms for several hundred years. We know that atoms are the stuff of all that is, both living and non-living. All matter is made up of atoms. It was from our knowledge of atoms and how they interact and react that gave us the technology for atomic bombs and nuclear energy resources. But now we know that an atom is not the smallest thing in the universe of reality. Atoms are made up of even smaller bits, or particles, or wave packets, or substances of reality. And it appears that these elements are made up of even smaller elements and or energy forces. This was first discovered in the early 1900s. We also know that it is electromagnetic force, or some would call it light, that holds electrons and protons together in atoms, and which hold atoms together to make molecules. So, at its most basic level, the atom is held together by light. So we now know that everything is made up of smaller and smaller parts. But we've also discovered that these small parts interact in ways in which we cannot describe by known laws of the universe. Quantum laws appear to be very different from the classical laws of nature. The quantum particles seem to be operating outside of our reality of time and space. We know, for example, that when one of these small parts is manipulated or stimulated in any way, it seems to instantly affect and cause reaction in the other small parts associated with it, which do not otherwise appear to be connected by any force or even connected by yet another small part. It doesn't even matter if these small parts are separated by great distances. They still react instantly to the stimulus applied to another part. It is as though they are tied together by some invisible force or energy, or some would even speculate, some unknown and immeasurable thought or communication process. This phenomenon is known as the entanglement theory. This gives rise to the philosophical thought that since everything elemental was created or came into being in one big instant, then everything at the subatomic level is still connected or entangled and somehow reacts together. In addition to these strange phenomena, we have no way of exactly and precisely knowing where and when one of these small parts will be in any particular location or state. We can only speak about their location or state of existence in probabilities. For example, once a quantum state has been prepared for observation, some aspect of it is measured, for example, its position or energy. If the experiment is repeated, however, so as to measure the same aspect of the same quantum state, the result of the measurement will often be different. Some physicists even theorize that it is the very act of measurement or observation itself that causes the results to change. This is known in quantum physics as the measurement problem. Also, it seems apparent thus far, the smaller you go in the observation of these small parts and their interactions, the less and less of anything that we know as real seems to exist. Time and space and matter seem to disappear into nothingness. Philosophically, this is very challenging, since we live in a real world with tangible objects existing in a time-space reality, yet we know that our reality is made up of the very particles which themselves seem to recede into nothingness, and they operate outside of time-space realities and natural laws of our material world. But how can this be? Welcome to just one more of the many conundrums of quantum mechanics. To most people, quantum mechanics is a very strange science. In all other scientific theories, we have tangible models of how we think things work. Quantum mechanics theory only describes how probabilities change with time. If you are confused by all of this, you then are in good company, as many scientists and physicists are on record as stating their confusion by it all. I do not think anyone has a good understanding of exactly what is going on within quantum mechanics, although many physicists are firmly convinced of the correctness of the particular interpretation that they favor. One thing is certain: as much as we do know about our world, our reality, and the universe, apparently there is an infinite universe of information that we do not know. Therefore, we are like ants looking at the moon at night, wishing we could just touch that big, bright, shiny light up above. Even though we, as an ant, can see it, We don't even remotely understand it, or its distance from us, nor the element of space in which it exists. Much less do we have the ability as an ant to touch it. It simply will never happen. But we try and touch it anyway. And that, I am afraid, is our plight in grasping the vastness of information concerning quantum mechanics reality.
This is a really interesting part right here, which shows how these Bible verses that people have laughed at for centuries, that are, detractors of the Bible, actually make sense. And so that's one of the scientific theories that is coming to light now that we haven't had in 2,000 or 3,000 years of the Bible, and which couldn't be applied to the making up of the Bible through the human platform. And the thing about what people say in regards to the Bible is that, well, the Bible isn't perfect, the Bible isn't very scientifically accurate, this and that. Well, when we talk about the Bible, we need to understand that most of it doesn't even deal with science. Most of it is history, records, legal documents, and poetry. Very little of it is scientifically based or addressing science in any way. Most of it is a human perspective of God and the spiritual world. But there is some things like Genesis which are starting to make more sense now through quantum physics. And then also with the idea that we bubbled up out of the earth, or that humans happened randomly in the universe, that there was no intelligence beyond the aftermath, that it was all created spontaneously. That doesn't make any sense. The scientific theory really is on the basis of intelligence and of components coming together through an intelligent factor, and proving these theories is very complex. But I think Myer does a great job on explaining this through DNA. The most information-rich system in our universe that we have discovered is the human DNA strand, which in just one single, microscopic strand, it can hold up to 3 billion characters of data of DNA markers, and we haven't even begun to understand that. But that is an intelligence that creates the human being in this DNA strand, telling the components what to do and how to make up the structures. And intelligence usually doesn't, well, in science, in all that we know, intelligence doesn't come from chaos. Intelligence comes from intelligence. And I wanted to play this for you from Stephen Myer.
If you look at an effect and you want to explain it, using the historical scientific method by reference to a cause that is known to produce that effect, the effect in question. So when we're looking at the origin of life, many biologists, biochemists, origin of life researchers in particular say the central thing that we need to explain is the origin of the information that makes life tick, that makes it run. What runs the show in biology is information. Much of it encoded digitally in the DNA molecule. We're also learning that there's other forms of information organized hierarchically in other parts of the genome and even beyond the genome. But it's very, I used to ask my students, if you want to give your computer a new functionality, a new function, what do you have to give it? And of course they knew. Code. You have to give it information. And the same thing is true in life. If you want to produce life in the first place, if you want to develop a new form of life from a pre-existing form of life, you have to provide information. And so the question is, where does that information come from? And original life researchers are, in particular, acutely aware of this problem. Since 1953, when Watson and Crick elucidated the structure of DNA and also showed in subsequent years that DNA functions like a digital code in a section of software or even a section of alphabetic text. Once they established that, then that raised a question: how did that feature of life arise? If you're going to explain the origin of life, you've got to explain its salient features. Its salient feature is arguably the presence of digital information in DNA. DNA encodes the proteins that do all the important jobs in the cell. So where did that information come from? Since the 1950s, original life biologists have realized the central thing they have to explain is the origin of information. Model after model has stumbled or even come to a grinding halt, has failed to explain precisely that feature of life. And so as I got into the topic of the origin of life, I realized that was really the central question. And as I was studying how scientists developed their theories to explain the origin of the first life, I realized that what was needed was a causal explanation for that feature of life. And I began to think more about this dictum that Darwin and Lyell had, that we should be explaining things by reference to presently known causes, presently acting causes, and I asked myself the question, what is the presently acting cause of digital code? What's the known cause of information generally? And what we know from uniform and repeated experience, which is the basis of all scientific reasoning in the past, about the past, is that information always comes from an intelligent source. Digital information, for sure, we know it comes from programmers, but information generally always comes from an intelligent source. So by using Darwin's rule of reasoning, I concluded that the best explanation for the origin of the information necessary to build the first life is actually intelligence, what we now call intelligent design.
And obviously I'm no scientist, I'm a layman, I'm an observer, I'm making comments from my limited knowledge, but I think that presenting this from a scientific standpoint is important. The fact that, at the smallest element, time doesn't really exist can explain a lot of the concepts in the Bible. The fact that God made light first and that light is, the core factor of all of our elements in the universe, the core of every atom. and the fact that information comes from information, all of this, in my perspective, leans heavily towards favoring biblical interpretations of the universe. And since I'm no scientist, I just wanted to give a partial list of well-known scientists that do believe and defend the creation theory. Gerald Ardosma, physicist and radiocarbon dating father. All of these people you can look up and find significant scientific breakthroughs for. You can find Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton. Some people will say that Einstein didn't believe in God, although he made statements on both sides of that sphere. And as a scientist, I think that he was open to the idea. Those people who say I'm agnostic, or I'm atheist, and I know there is no God, are really being intellectually dishonest with themselves and others, because they can't know. If they say they know, that's very unscientific. When you put limits on possibilities like that, when you shut off any possible continuance of the discussion, that there's no God, and that's the end of the story, like Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens or some of these others do, that's very intellectually dishonest. I think that agnosticism, which is what I think Einstein was more of than atheist, but I think agnosticism is a more intellectually honest way of pursuing information and understanding God, or the lack of. An agnostic basically says, I have no proof that there is God, but I have no proof that there isn't God. Basically, I don't know. And I think that's a much more honest approach. With the information I just showed you, I do believe I have evidence there is a God. I believe that was the evidence right there. I think that is a very small part of it. There's a big, vast bank of information out there that leans heavily towards intelligent design and creationism. But certainly the human DNA and the elements of the atom are very reasonably considerable evidence for God and creation and intelligent design, whatever you want to call it. But there is just a lot of scientists certainly that are well known and are well thought and have thought outside the box. They don't just go with the line. They don't follow the leader. They're not sheep. They're people who have thought outside the box and created new scientific theories, and they heavily and directly defend the biblical story of creation. So I'm no scientist. As I said, I'm just an observer, but thanks for spending time with me and reviewing what I've found and what I believe is true. So thanks for joining us. Check us out on xcannabis.com and www.sensielife.com. Take care.